The Wellsprings by Alphonse Gratry. Chapter the 2nd. Inspiration. To proceed then with this advice that I am giving to you who believe in the presence of God, and who have resolved to face the stern training of his divine school, I trust that I may succeed in getting you to understand me, and may lead you to the practice of what I am trying to impress on you. I shall take your advice, you will say to me. I shall be able to endure solitude and silence. I shall therefore write. But what? The answer is implied in what we have already said. It is very far from that counsel of Boileau's, Faites choix d'un sujet. Choose a subject. What a strange saying! Does a serious man ever choose a subject? If he has no subject, he does not write. He has no choice in the matter. In the first place, there is in reality but one subject, God, man, and nature in their relation to one another, a relation wherein good and evil, truth and beauty, life and death, history and futurity meet in one, so that the single yet all-embracing subject of the soul's meditation is, in truth, that subject which St. Augustine points to. I sought for many a day. I sought to know my own self, myself and my own good, and the evil that I must shun. Volventi mihi, et per multos dies, querenti sedulo, memetipsum et bonum meum, et malum quod esset vitandum. But then, how am I to approach this universal subject? Under what aspect must I take it? I answer, you must take it as it presents itself. Have not musicians remarked that, when the soul is stirred to its depths, there is one tone, only one, to the exclusion of all others to which it can vibrate? And if we look into the matter closely, we see that not only does this predominating emotion dictate the tone, but it controls the measure, the groundwork of the general harmony, nay, sometimes the very details of the melody. Now, if you are in silence, if you are awakened, moved, for usually true silence causes an awakening and stirs a genuine emotion, then these harmonies, these inward melodies, though you have not, it may be, learned to hear them aright, are within you, and there correspond to these harmonies certain visions, certain aspects of the eternal ideas, certain particular and actual inspirations from God. Do you imagine, when you are recollected, that you are going to find yourself in presence of divine attributes of the kind that professors of philosophy describe? By no means. You will find yourself, as a matter of fact, in presence of him whom the gospel proclaims, the Word made flesh. That is why the gospel does not say, one is your master, God. It says in a more precise way, one is your master, Christ. Matthew 23:10. God is for us not alone the absolute, the invisible, the changeless, the everlasting. He is also the living God, present, loving, and suffering in mankind. From him it is that, if you are really his disciple, there come the most personal, the most actual, the most unmistakable inspirations. Now, what kind of inspirations should the Word made flesh for the saving of mankind give to his disciples? Ought it not be such as are necessary, here and now, to the salvation of the world in which they live, and, above all, to their own salvation? Their own salvation, the salvation of the world in which they live, there is the universal work and idea, one and the same for all servants of God at the same period, but different for each one of them according to the people to which they belong, according to the role that necessity and duty assign to them in the struggle. Thus, the idea that might well be an inspiration to you is the salvation of the world in which you live. It is your own salvation. Your guiding idea, your light and wellspring of life, is the living God made man, willing your salvation and that of the world, working for it by his ever-active providence, and calling on you to help him, showing to you the exact aspect of truth which the world at the present time, and you yourself at this moment, ought to see and understand, which you must work out into practice so as not to drop out of the plan which his providence is working out. Footnote. Literally, so as not to escape from the providential plane. Let us come down to details, that we may see in particular what are those inspirations which are received by the soul that has succeeded in achieving silence. I have said that you must silence in you the din of the world, and that in consequence you must break with the world. But do you imagine that thereby, in order to listen to God alone, you have broken with mankind? Far from it. It is right to break with the world. It is impossible to break with mankind. The world is not mankind. The trend of the world and the trend of mankind are things wholly distinct. The latter is law. The former is the upsetting of law. Just as the total motion of the earth in its course round the sun involves two tendencies, one of which drives it along its regular orbit, while the other ever attempts to draw it aside into eccentric oscillations, so mankind at every point of its course has two tendencies, its regular and providential tendency, and a capricious and perverse tendency called the world in the gospel sense of the word. With which of these tendencies do you mean to identify yourself? To which of the two will you give all your energies? You must choose. This false tendency must be brought to naught. It is that evil world which is the resultant of all the selfishness and blindness and lustfulness and pride of the age, a depraved and evil tendency which is thwarting the true progress of mankind. And so by breaking with the world, we do not break with mankind, nay, rather we rally to the side of mankind, and thereby to that of God. And indeed, when a man has freed himself so that his life may be wholly for God, the first thing he finds within him is the love of man. He that loves the world does not love men. But when silence has awakened in us the feeling of God, then the feeling for mankind, the feeling for others, the feeling of brotherhood comes back to us. Communion with humanity at large begins in us, because we have just turned our backs on the narrow, sectarian spirit of the world. We enter once more into a genuine and inspiring sympathy with the generality of mankind, of all ages and nations, with all men, living or dead, who are united with one another and with God. This sound and essential portion of mankind, which has a certain unity in space and time, seeing that it has God, this universal assemblage, this Catholic Church in the widest sense of the word, this communion of men in God, touches us, reheartens us, uplifts us with the divine inspirations which it brings. The common fears, the common hopes, the longings, musings, strivings of this united multitude of souls bear us up, enter into our souls. We look out over the earth as Christ looked, with tears. We see men sit in darkness and the shadow of death. We see, as Christ saw, that the harvest is great and the laborers are few. Then indeed we know what remains for us to do. We know what to think of and at what to work. The subject of all our labors has been found.